back in the days when I was in high school, it was a while ago, but, we used to get these questions at the final exam called, what is that called? Pick the odd one out, something like that. Have you, like there will be objective type questions and there will be fill in the blanks, and then there will be this pick the odd one out. I always liked it because it's like category matching, right? Something like they will give you 4 options, A, B, C, D, and then one will be different from all the other 3. Like, for example, A, church, B, a temple, C, a mosque, and D, an airport. So, you know what the odd one is the airport, right? The choice D. Like that, I've given you 4 choices. A, Matthew, B, Mark, and C, Luke, and D, John. They were telling the very, very, very last hour of Jesus on the cross. We didn't read the whole story. The very, very last hour of Jesus' story. So I'll just read it to refresh your memory, just the important part. Listen to it carefully. You can answer this. The question again is pick the odd one out. A, B, C, D. Matthew, Mark, John, or Luke. Okay? Matthew says this. Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Okay? Mark said, and Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And Luke said, and Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And John said, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. John, why is that? Because there is something which was repeated in the first 3 gospel accounts, which is Jesus cried. There was a cry, there was a sound of cry that you can listen to in the first 3 accounts. Matthew said Jesus cried out again. And then Mark said Jesus uttered a loud cry. And then Luke said Jesus crying out with a loud voice. Now, there is nothing wrong in crying. And Jesus was not, Jesus cried. Especially, when Jesus wept, there is a verse in the Bible. Jesus was vulnerable. There was nothing wrong. Jesus did not find anything showing that vulnerability in public. But when somebody cries when they are going to die, it doesn't really sound fitting to our understanding as a leader, right? Like, I don't know if I'm going to cry when I'm going to die. But even thinking about that, I'm afraid of dying in so many ways. I'm not afraid of death, but I'm afraid of the process of dying, I'm okay to, if we can just die like that, it's fine. But the process of death, so I'm kind of afraid. But the courageous, brave men are not afraid of death. They don't cry when they die. Rather, we have read in big legends and epics like, they faced death with a smile, or they looked at death with a smile on their face, or something like that, right? So it's very interesting to hear that Jesus was crying out loud, as said by Matthew, Mark, and Luke, right? And then John says, this is what happened in John's gospel. He said, it is finished. Okay? Jesus said it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is like the end of a theater production. At the end, you take a bow. Like, you after a great performance, the actors come back and they take a bow, right? So it is like Jesus didn't cry. Jesus said it is finished. It's done. The curtain is now down, and Jesus came out and took a bow, and nobody took his spirit. He gave it up. That's what it said. He didn't just die. He just thought, okay, that's it. I'm giving up my spirit. No, that is diametrically different from all the other 3 accounts. Now, the verse which Jesus said in John's gospel, as we know, it is finished, is written only in the book of John. Only John heard it. And that word has a big theological significance, and I don't want to explain that because, that is a sermon in itself. But just to refresh your memory, you probably have heard sermons on that. I'm not a Greek scholar, but the Greek word which is used there is something like tetelestai or something like that, which is normally, they say, is used in the context of, for example, a gladiator games, right? When there's this gladiator games, you know what I'm talking about, gladiator. They fight, and in the end, the guy who won is going to put his head on the other guy's head, the guy, the guy who's dead, and then he is going to he will shout, looking at the crowd, and say, "It is finished." It tetelestai. So it is actually a sound of victory. It is not somebody crying. It's not a cry of defeat, but it is a triumphant voice. If you really study that particular verse, tetelestai. Now again, if you understand more in our context. Another occasion when that particular word is used is because how many of us, we haven't done any gladiator games, and we haven't even watched gladiator. But a better context to understand is mortgage. That we all understand, right? Most of you have mortgage, except us. So but we used to have mortgage. But mortgage is something we can completely understand, right? We buy a house, and we think it is ours, but it's not ours. It's the bank's property, right? And so we have this 20 years, 30 years, and we used to have 40-year mortgage, right? And then you keep paying and paying. When at the end of 30 years or 40 years, when you are 80, or when you are that old, finally you pay the mortgage off, right? So back in the days, 2,000 years ago, if you had a mortgage, if you paid off all your mortgage, at the end of the 30 or 40 years, then they will take your mortgage document and put a stamp on it. And that stamp is called tetelestai, which means it is done. It is finished. Paid in full, exactly. Paid in full. It is finished. So did you get that picture? So John says there was nothing tragic about this account. It was not a cry. It was not something we have to feel sad about. But there was something triumphant happening. Now, why is it so? That's my question. I don't have a big, long sermon. Why is it so? Why only John got this point? Why Matthew and Mark and Luke missed this, to me, one of the most important part in the whole gospel story, even though they are telling the same story. Now, I have a theory, and my theory is this. Like, did you listen to when Walson Uncle said, 3 out of the 4 Gospels, 3 of them are eyewitness accounts, right? 3 of them actually saw Jesus, they walked with Jesus, and they knew who Jesus was, except for Luke. He was a Gentile. He was not even part of the Jewish or even Jesus' disciples group, right? Having said that, even though they are all eyewitnesses, this particular incident, when this particular incident happened, there was only one eyewitness, right? Where was Matthew when Jesus was on the cross? Matthew was not there. Even though he was eyewitness to Jesus, Matthew was not really there. The last time we saw him was in Gethsemane. He was probably with Jesus with all the other disciples. Then all the Roman soldiers came, and according to prophecy, the shepherd was struck and the sheep were scattered, and everybody, including Matthew, disappeared. Then we don't see them anymore, because any step further, they have to risk their life, right? Now, Mark was actually a teenager, according to scholars. He was just a young guy. But again, his gospel is based on, like Walson Uncle said, Mark's gospel is the first gospel, and his gospel is based on Peter's preaching notes. So whatever Peter had, this little preaching notes, and Matthew took it and wrote his book. That's what happened. But it was not even present in Peter's preaching note. Where was Peter? Where was Peter when Jesus died? He was not there. He went a little further than Matthew or many other disciples, but then a rooster crowed, right? Then he turned around and he went back. So even though Mark's gospel is an eyewitness account, neither Mark nor Peter was there at the cross of Jesus. And obviously, as we heard about Luke, he was not even a Christian at that time, and we don't even know where he was. He was not there, right? But John was there. Now, did you get, this is the point I want to take away from this. John was closer to the cross than all the other writers of the gospel. John was right there. And he heard or he saw what happened at the cross. And he heard what really was that came out of Jesus' mouth. And that was a mystery which was revealed only to John. See, this happens to us all the time. When I grew up, I grew up in a Syrian Orthodox tradition back in India. And then there used to be Pentecostals, there's some Pentecostal preachers came to our town. And I still remember, I was just a teenager. We used to kind of make fun of them. And because all these people, they scream and they shout. And, you hear their prayers with this drum, and we always used to make fun of them saying that, who died in their house? Because the way they see is like crying out loud, right? Malayalam, it is colloquial. But they say, who died in their house? And then we used to make, just whistle at them and all that kind of stuff. So when we always thought this didn't make any sense. This what is coming out of this house or what is coming out of their prayer center is nothing but this boisterous, loud cry. It didn't make any sense. But then one day we stepped in. When one day we stepped inside, we came closer to them. We sat next to them and then realized, man, this is not crying. What they are doing is actually making a joyful noise unto the Lord. There is something more than we know. But the problem with us is that we almost always watch from a distance. And then we think it is all some loud, boisterous, meaningless cry. Right? This happens. When we come near the cross, our perspective changes. The way we see things changes. And that's the story of John. And John was there. He risked his life, very life, to come to the foot of the cross. And because of that, he realized this is not a cry. This is not failure. There is nothing tragic about it. But there is a hidden mystery here. What he is hearing, the gladiator's voice. Tetelestai. It is finished. Jesus is just bowing out. And that's why when you come closer to my little message to you today is that it's this Good Friday. Can we take a decision or a commitment to come closer to the cross of Christ? Amen. And look at things in a different light so that mysteries will be revealed. Even in our own pain, we will see a victory. And the purpose of God's plan. And the third day, the hope is going to come. That hope will come only when we come closer. Otherwise, it is a meaningless cry. It doesn't make any sense to us. I'll just end with a story. When back in India again, our little church, when we started going to a Pentecostal church, where there's this 90-year-old Appachan, right? A 90-year-old grandpa, who was basically living alone at that time. He used to walk 5 miles to come to our church. The church was in our house, actually. That's a big story. But in our house, we started the first Pentecostal church in that area. And then this old gentleman would come every Sunday without fail till he died, 90-year-old, walking, very healthy. So he used to, I always used to sit next to him as a teen. I was like 18 or 19, and I would sit next to him and listen to all his stories. And, I was kind of his buddy anyway. But so he told me this story, which really helped me to cope up with many of my own issues, spiritual and physical, in so many ways. So this is what he said. When he was a young boy, teenager or maybe a little older than that, he used to he left everything he had in Kerala and went to North India, like a prodigal son. And he sold everything he had, and he spent everything he had, and finally he didn't have a job, and he got a job in a potter's field in North India. And his job was to, how do you say that, tread the clay, clay? The clay, and somebody has to, is it treading? Is that what you call it? Somebody has to, because we didn't have any machines and all that, right, back in the days. Somebody has to make it, yeah, exactly, pliable. So I think the process is called treading the clay, or so you have to do it with your foot. Like you have to keep doing this. It's very painful thing. Anyway, so he got this job, and he was there, and the first day of his job, he was doing this, and then he said after half an hour he couldn't move because it was such a stressful thing for you, right? The muscles and everything. And then the owner of this potter's field, the porter, called him and said, "Oh, is it difficult? Okay, I'll tell you what to do. So what religion are you?" Then he said, "Well, I am a Christian." So this potter is not a Christian. He's a Hindu. So this Hindu told the Christian, when you do treading the clay, why don't you think about the death of Jesus? Picture the death of Jesus. Picture the cross of Jesus. And then start treading the clay. Then he said, okay. So the Christian young man started treading the clay, and he was thinking about the cross and kind of relieved a lot of his pain, because he was being part of this painful experience on the cross, and he is coming closer to the cross of Christ, right? But after a couple of hours, again he got tired. Then he went to the potter and said, "Oh, I'm tired. I mean, it worked, but for a couple of hours, but that's it." Then he said, "Okay, when I asked you to picture the cross of Christ, what exactly were you seeing?" "Oh, I saw the cross of Christ, and I saw these two other, other thieves who were being crucified with Jesus. Then I saw Roman soldiers." Then he said, No, come closer. Come closer. I don't want you to see the whole scene. Just Jesus, come closer to the cross. So he went back and he started treading the clay again. This time he only saw Jesus. So he had more focus. He was coming closer to the cross, right? So he did that. He did that after 5 or 6 hours again. His legs started paining, and then he went to the potter. And the potter, again, who was a Hindu, told this Christian, "Okay, now what do you see?" "I'm seeing the cross of Christ. I can see him, and I can see the nails in his..." "No," he said, "come closer. I want you to come closer. Just focus on somewhere. Just focus on his head, for example. Just don't look at any other part of his body. Just focus here. And what do you see now?" He said, "Well, now I think I can see his hair. And I think I can see the crown of thorns. And I can see the blood that is oozing out of that crown of thorns. And I can also see the sweat, which is mixed with blood. And this is something he didn't see before." Do you get what I'm saying? So in the end, this 90-year-old Appachan was saying that he could do that for days and weeks, because he was coming closer and closer to the cross of Christ. And in the pain of the cross, he found hope, and he realized a God who identified with his own pain. And that was a mystery revealed to him. And then he realized that even in this pain, there is that sound of victory. There is that it is finished. And there is that hope of the new beginning, which is going to happen in the third day. So come closer to the cross. Not like Matthew and Mark. And we can talk about the cross of Christ. We can write about the cross of Christ. We can read somebody's notes and, make eloquent lectures of the cross of Christ. But like John, let's come to the cross of Christ. Let's listen to him closely, so that mysteries will be revealed to us. May God bless.